The answer to the question I've posed in the title of this video is simple. Yes, Texas can ignore the Supreme Court. After all, they're doing so. But they're not supposed to ignore the Supreme Court, as the Constitution gives the court final authority in such matters. So what are such matters? Well, the matter at hand is the fact that the Texas Governor Greg Abbot, using the Texas National Guard, has been blocking U.S. Border Patrol agents, the federal government as it were, from entering an area called Eagle Pass, so that the agents could remove the razor wire from the river that Texas has installed to block immigrant crossings. This razor wire already resulted in the drowning death of a woman and 2 children who were attempting to cross the river. The Supreme Court recently ruled that Texas could not block the government from entering the area and must allow Border Patrol agents to enter and remove the razor wire. Some, like Congressman Chip Roy and now Ted Cruz, urged Greg Abbott to ignore the ruling, saying, just as Abbott and criminal AG Ken Paxton have been saying, that it is their constitutional duty to secure the border. Earlier, Greg Abbott even said that the only reason they weren't shooting immigrants at the border is because that pesky old Joe Biden would prosecute them for murder. So despite the ruling, the Texas National Guard is still blocking the federal government from accessing the area, and yes, Texas can ignore the Supreme Court. Greg Abbott crowed about it on Twitter X, saying, "The Texas National Guard continues to hold the line in Eagle Pass. Texas will not back down from our efforts to secure the border in Biden's absence." I think then that I asked the wrong question. The question is, what happens when a state ignores the Supreme Court? The court has no real enforcement power of its own. It has no police, no army. It is in fact the weakest, most powerful branch. The Supreme Court has the final word, but no power to see that its orders are carried out. It relies on the executive branch, or the DOJ for that, and in this case the DOJ will surely be interested. However, taking Texas back to court over the matter would simply result in another round of court proceedings that would culminate, I suppose, in the Supreme Court once again ruling against Texas, and then Texas deciding whether to ignore the Supreme Court a second time. Let's be clear here, the Texas government is ignoring federal law and has taken an action that could be viewed as a rebellion of sorts. The president could make a case that it's time to exercise executive powers in this matter. For example, Representative Joaquin Castro of Texas said that Abbott is using the Texas National Guard to obstruct and create chaos at the border. He urged President Biden to establish sole federal control of the National Guard. The president's authority to take control of the Texas National Guard in this particular instance is not clear. State National Guard members are not considered active duty members of the U.S. Armed Forces. Now, Section 502 of Title 32 does provide authority for the Secretary of the Army and the Air Force to call National Guard units to active duty, but this is for so-called training purposes. In the past, including under the Trump administration, National Guard units have been called under Title 32 to participate in various operations such as disaster relief and, yes, border control. However, under Title 32, the unit remains in control of the state's governor, meaning Biden would need Abbott's cooperation. Abbott was cooperating, of course, with Trump. This clearly is not going to happen now. Instead, under Title 10, the president can order National Guard troops to report for official federal active duty military service. Now, does the president have the authority to invoke Title 10 in this case? Well, does Greg Abbott have the authority to block the federal government and ignore the Supreme Court? In other words, if Joe Biden decides to take control of the Texas National Guard, who's to stop him? Likewise, if he decides to send military units to secure the border under federal control and remove the razor wire, who's to stop him? Meanwhile, Texas is not only continuing to block Border Patrol agents from entering, but they're setting up even more razor wire. The Department of Homeland Security wrote to Texas demanding full access by January 26. If there is an or else implied in the letter, it's not clear what the or else is. This is likely to heat up. Are we heading for a real showdown between Texas and the federal government? Will Biden declare some kind of martial law in the area? Well, I have my doubts about that, but someone has to give, and it's not going to be the federal government.